Welcome to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Candidate Forum for House District 50. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Richard Nelson, founder and executive director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. And we're hosting forums like this across the state to better help voters get to know the candidates, their priorities, and where they stand on important issues. Joining us today for this forum is State Representative Candy Massaroni of Bardstown. Candy, welcome to the forum.
Thank you for having me.
Candy, you were first elected in 2022, just 2 years ago. You wrapped up your first term, and my first question is this: is Frankfort what you expected it to be?
It is not what I expected it to be. I'm from a military background, so I thought I would kind of know the bureaucracy of government from on a state level, but it's not what I expected it to be. But I'm hoping that we can make some changes and make it more of what I expected it to be. So.
Now, of course, for those not familiar with the General Assembly, every even-numbered year, they're in session for 60 working days. Every odd-numbered year, they're in for 30 working days. And then, of course, they meet when they're out of session. Legislators meet for interim committee meetings. But while they're in session, it's frenetic. They're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of bills, and they have a lot of pressure, busy days, a lot of people that are vying for their attention, and a lot of important policies to consider. So, Candy, second question is, what are some of the high points of your first term in office? Some of the memorable moments, some of the positive things that you've seen happen?
Absolutely. I think Senate Bill 150 from 2 years ago, I think that was one of my most exciting moments that we actually got legislation through. Okay, Senate Bill 150 was to protect children from gender mutilation and some of the things that I think is a role of a government to do. And we had a really hard time getting that through, and we had some great reps working on it. And we were able to actually push it through at the last minute of the session. So I think that is probably one of my proudest bills that I've helped work on and get through the session.
So that bill, just to clarify, it prevented gender dysphoric minors from undergoing puberty blockers and hormone therapy and transition surgery. Along with that, it banned the teaching of gender ideology in public school classrooms. It stopped boys from going into girls' bathrooms. It required local school boards to have policies consistent with biological gender. So there were a number of things that it addressed, and that was, I think, an important bill, as you said, and something that most Kentuckians at the end of the day agreed with. Candy, before we got on the air, we talked about a tax policy that you're in Bardstown, of course. The bourbon industry is very important to Bardstown, in really this region of Kentucky. But a bill that was introduced 2 years ago that would have further given the bourbon industry certain tax breaks. And even though it's an important industry, brings in a lot of revenue, they employ a lot of people, there was the issue of whether or not that tax break and very, very favorable treatment to one industry was whether that was fair to other businesses and industries. And you took a stand on that issue. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I took a stand on that issue just because it impacts my community and some of the communities that surround me so drastically. Our school systems will lose, I think, over $9 million a year when it goes away. There's our local fire departments. I mean, we're going to lose a lot of revenue from that, and the one have to make it up. The citizens, unfortunately, will have to make it up unless we come up with a better solution. So what happened in 2014? The legislator they kind of developed a tax plan for the bourbon industry, and the local governments kind of agreed to it. So currently, most of the bourbon industries are on IRB, which is the industrial revenue bond. Industrial revenue bonds, the bourbon industry doesn't pay the taxes on their warehouses. They still fall under the county, so they're not paying a lot of the tax revenues. So unfortunately, that bill did pass, but we were able to lessen the impact to our local community over a longer period of time. But we have a lot of work locally to make up that revenue without hurting our constituents.
Okay, very good. Very good. Moving on to another important issue that the General Assembly tackled this last session was school choice. House Bill 2 is a constitutional amendment that passed the legislature, and House Bill 2 simply allows for the possibility of school choice to happen in Kentucky. And this was related to a Supreme Court ruling, state Supreme Court ruling, that said that education opportunity accounts are unconstitutional. And essentially, if any meaningful school choice is allowed in Kentucky, the Constitution would have to be amended. Candy, tell us where you stand on House Bill 2 and then school choice in general.
I am definitely for House Bill 2 and school choice. I think, a lot of the people that disagree with school choice, they're leaving out the most important factor, which is the children. So I think every child should have an option to succeed, and I think we definitely need that in Kentucky. Unfortunately, a lot of our school districts are at the bottom of the nation with their reading and writing. So I think it should be less about institutions and more about children. So I'm a huge advocate for school choice. I don't know how it's going to look. I think every community and every child deserves an option. Every parent deserves an option to where they send their children to school.
Currently, Kentucky has SEEK funding, and essentially that means that there's a certain dollar amount that's allocated toward every student. Is somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 per student, I want to say. Do you believe that that money, let's say House Bill 2 passes, this constitutional amendment passes in the fall, and we get some kind of school choice, would you say that that money should follow the student, whether the parents are, let's say, homeschooling or sending their child to private school? Should the SEEK money follow the student?
I definitely believe the money should follow the student. That's what it's there for. We do have a lot of the homeschool parents don't want the money. So, I mean, we're going to have to work out some good policy. If a parent doesn't want the money, that should be an option. But I definitely think we should be funding children, not institutions.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think your opponent in the Republican primary was there's a PAC working on his behalf, and that PAC was funded by the Jefferson County Teachers Association. Uh, how has that played into your race as well?
Obviously, he's had a lot of ads on television, and some mailers from the Jefferson County Teachers Union funded PAC and other PACs. But I don't think I don't know what we will have to see on May 21st how it's going to play into it. But I will stand and I will say if the Jefferson County Teachers Union is against me, I will take that as the biggest endorsement I could probably have. So
Okay, it's been said that a political candidate can be known by the enemies they keep. So it sounds like you're, maybe that's a strong word, but by their opponents. How about we put it that way? By their opponents. So very good. Candy, let's move on to an issue that I know you've taken a stand for while you were in the legislature, and that is elevating and protecting the sanctity of human life. You were endorsed by Kentucky Right to Life Victory PAC. Your opponent was not. First question is, when do you believe life begins?
at conception.
Okay. This last General Assembly session, a couple of bills were introduced. One by a colleague of yours from Louisville that would have allowed exceptions to abortion. As it stands, Kentucky outlaws all abortions except to save the life or preserve the health of the mother. This bill that was proposed this last session would allow exceptions for rape or incest. Where do you stand on the exception issue?
I am for no exceptions. I think every child is a gift from God, no matter the circumstances of how they were conceived. So I'm against all exceptions.
I've asked the same question, Candy, in other candidate forums, and it's been suggested that there should be greater penalties towards the rapists, towards those who perpetrate sexual violence, especially if it results in conception. What's your stand? Do you think there should be harsher penalties on the rapist, and especially if it results in conception?
Absolutely, and I actually filed some legislation for pedophiles, people that victimize children. So I think we do need to make a tougher stand because it's becoming more common, and I think the consequences need to be greater to prevent such horrible incidents from happening.
Very good. What was the result of your bill? Did that make its way through the session?
It, no, it did not move. So it was in committee on committees. So, but I'll plan on filing more legislation next year.
Another important issue that we hear talked about in Republican primaries is the Second Amendment. And Candy, you were endorsed by the NRA for your conservative position on preserving Second Amendment rights. I'm going to ask this question in the context of a tragic mass shooting in Louisville last year. April 10th marked the 1-year anniversary of the mass shooting at Fifth Third Bank in Louisville, where 5 people were murdered. In response, the CAR Act was introduced in the state Senate. CAR stands for Crisis Aversion and Rights Retention, which allows for the temporary transfer of firearms away from people on the brink of crisis. What was your position? I know it didn't get to the House. I don't think it didn't make it out of the Senate. Do you think that was a good step towards addressing mass shooting, or is that the wrong direction?
I think we're in the wrong direction. I think everybody has a right to protect themselves. I think if we're looking at preventing mass shootings, we need to have more people carry weapons that have good intentions. I mean, any tragedy, it's a tragedy, and my heart breaks for those families. But taking away people's right to bear arms is not the solution.
Okay. So, what would be your solution, though, for mass shootings? You said the solution is not to take away law-abiding citizens' right to bear arms. But how do we address this? It seems that every so often we pick up the newspaper or read something online of another mass shooting. What is the solution to mass shootings, if there is one?
Well, I mean, it's a societal issue, and like I said, I think we should do away with a lot of gun-free zones that we have. I think if people know other people are carrying, they're not going to be as motivated to go to somewhere and um, do a mass shooting. If they know other people are carrying, it's a possibility. And I think more gun-free zones is the solution. More preventing you taking away the gun-free zones. So.
Kentucky is at a crossroads. We can choose to give in to the radical left, or we can choose to engage the culture in a God-honoring way.
I started the Commonwealth Policy Center because I believe that Christians have a responsibility to influence government and society to the glory of God. While the Commonwealth Policy Center's made a significant impact, our work isn't finished. If you'd like to join our movement working for timeless values, then head to our website.
To learn more, go to commonwealthpolicycenter.org.
Very good. If you're just tuning in, you are watching the Commonwealth Policy Center's Candidate Forum for House District 50. I'm Richard Nelson, here with State Representative Candy Massaroni of Bardstown. Candy, a big issue last legislative session was the expansion of sports gambling in creating a regulatory framework where the state of Kentucky would get some of the tax benefit from legalized sports gambling. According to an excerpt from the financial publication Morningstar, Toronto Raptors center Jonte Porter was recently banned for life from the NBA after he placed at least 13 bets on NBA games using an associate sportsbook account, disclosed confidential information to bettors, and limited his participation in at least one game so that a certain bet would pay out. First question, Candy, do you believe that legalized sports gambling, that we could have seen this happening, where the corruption of sports would happen after sports gambling is legalized?
Well, I voted against the legislation, and I think our computer's freezing. I'm sorry. I voted against the legislation last time. I think we kind of set ourselves up for a lot of problems in the future with the legislation we passed.
Very good. And one of the arguments against it was that those sports gambling apps would be downloaded to cell phones. And young boys in particular, teenage boys, are very interested and they're already involved with sports gambling. And the concern was that they would find a way to falsify their age get on those apps and start gambling, and for many develop an addiction. I suspect that's an issue that you may be addressing in the future if you are reelected to serve in House District 50.
I think we've already seen a dramatic increase in gambling addiction over the past several months to a year or so.
Candy, I want to move on to another topic here. DEI, which stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Last legislative session, there were 3 bills introduced to push against DEI, which particularly in our colleges and universities, critics have said that it does away with merit and it focuses on external characteristics like race or ethnicity or gender and elevates people based on those superficial external markers. Where do you stand on DEI? How did you vote on House Bill 9 in particular? That was something you had a chance to vote on. Where do you stand on it, and how did you vote on House Bill 9?
I voted for House Bill 9 to pass the House. I don't think, I think DEI is wrong. It's being used as a tool in our colleges. There's a lot of money that goes into it. I don't think it's based on a person's merit at all. So I think we need to go away from it. And there's millions of dollars of taxpayer money going into these programs, and it's just not justified.
What would you say to those in higher ed who say this jeopardizes academic freedom? Where, let's say, you have a class that has DEI principles, or they have a program that's teaching DEI based on DEI. How would you respond to somebody in higher ed that says that, look, we have freedom in higher ed to talk about these things or to promote these things? What is your response as a state legislator?
Well, you can't take away other people's freedoms based on the color or race or their gender. I mean, it's just, you're putting merit on a person. You're giving merit based on these things that's already illegal to do on the federal level. We're not supposed to, race, sex. We shouldn't be using those as a factor. So I'm completely against it, and I think the colleges. It's definitely a lot of money goes into it, and it's not justifiable.
Sure. Do you expect, even though the DEI bills did not pass this last session, there was an agreement between the House and Senate, 2 different versions that were proposed? Do you expect this issue to come up next legislative session?
We will bring up this issue again next session.
Candy, moving on to another important bill tackled by our last General Assembly was Senate Bill 239, which proposed to provide conscience protections for medical professionals who object to procedures that would violate their conscience, things such as abortion, gender transition surgeries, prescribing hormones to minors. The bill passed the Senate, but it did not get a hearing in the House. Where do you stand on this issue of medical rights of conscience?
I absolutely support medical rights of conscience. I think people should be able to, your faith doesn't go away just because of where you work. If abortion, transgender, if somebody doesn't believe in that, they should never be forced to participate in it.
I want to move back to an issue in the public schools. Last year in the General Assembly, a Senate bill made its way into law, and it gave parents recourse when they found pornographic or sexually explicit books in their school libraries. It gave them recourse to remove those books. This came from a real case in Louisville, where Louisville middle schools had books that were promoting homosexual pornography to young people. A parent brought this to the attention of the school board. The school board, interestingly enough, told the parent that they could not recite some of the passages there because it was considered obscene. And yet that school board allowed the book to remain. The state legislature took action, again, to give parents recourse. Where did you stand on that bill?
I was a co-sponsor on that bill, so I'm definitely for. I would like to. We actually filed more legislation this year as a co-sponsor on, if a parent can't read a book at a school board, that book is automatically removed from all public schools in the state. Unfortunately, that didn't move, but I think it's ridiculous that we have this type of material available to our children without the parents' knowledge. I have been a big advocate of trying to teach parents of what is actually going on in some of our school districts with this material. I hand out the material and say, this is what's in your child's school. So I think if a parent can't read a book out loud during the school board meeting, that book needs to be removed from the libraries.
Very good. I think was that House Bill 91, Josh Calloway, I think may have been the primary sponsor of that. Is that what you're referring to?
Shane Baker was the sponsor. Yeah, I think Shane Baker and Josh Keller both had legislation similar. So
Very good. Do you plan to bring it up next session?
absolutely, absolutely.
So, Candy, here's my follow up. How do you respond to people who say that you are for censorship and you're part of the book banning wave? How do you respond?
Well, I think I am not for book banning per se, but I am for protecting the hearts and minds of our children. This is pornographic material. This belongs nowhere in our educational system. Period. Um, it's filthy, and it shouldn't be in our schools. It shouldn't be made available to our children. It's corrupting, like I said, the hearts and minds of our children.
Very good. Let's move to taxes and spending and economic policy. Your opponent in the primary was endorsed by the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, which is interesting. It's rare that they would endorse a challenger over an incumbent. Did they explain to you their endorsement process and as to why you didn't get the endorsement?
No, and I actually had no contact with them at all. So
Okay, so you didn't see their survey?
no survey. No.
Interesting. Okay. Very good. Let's move on to tax policy. The Kentucky General Assembly is on track to eliminate the state income tax, and they're in the process of replacing that tax on certain services. First question, are you in favor of eliminating the state income tax?
Absolutely. I think it should be based more on a consumption tax in the direction we're going. So, yes.
Okay. And then the next question, Candy, is what are those businesses and services that should be taxed to make up the removal of the state income tax?
Well, I think we have done quite a few of the businesses already. We've added those into our tax code. But I think one thing we should always stay away from is the medical. I don't think medicine should be taxed ever, or even the food tax, food or groceries. I think we need to look at that and make sure we protect the essentials. But anything that's consumption that an individual can choose to do, I think that's fair.
Okay. Okay. Candy, am I missing any other high profile issues that you have dealt with in your first term? I know we've covered a lot of ground from social issues to tax policy and economic issues. What other issues did you see in the first term of office that maybe I missed?
I think the social issues were big, and I think we still have some work to do on the social issues. But I think some of the legislation that we did pass, I was not in agreement with because I think some of the players behind it wasn't necessarily for the people of Kentucky, or definitely not my constituents. Some of the legislation I voted against that probably didn't make some people happy in the leadership roles of the House, but I think we need to concentrate on more constituent-based bills, basically stuff that helps Kentuckians, and maybe a little bit less on the chamber's legislation or the bourbon industry legislation.
And that was hard, by the way, I know, for you to take a stand on that because the bourbon industry is so influential in Bardstown.
Yes. And we appreciate them, but it's still the constituents are first. So I think, and we really do appreciate the bourbon industry. However, it has changed a little bit over the past decade. It used to be very much locally owned bourbon industries, and now most of them are owned by foreign entities that don't understand their community as much as they once did when they were locally owned.
Sure. Very good. Candy, one question. I know that your faith is important to you. Often, those who have a strong Christian faith, when it comes to government and serving in office, they're often criticized of imposing their values or trying to set up a theocracy, something like that. How do you respond to those who say, "Well, Candy, don't be pro-life, or you're imposing your Christian values on us because of your pro-life position," or when it comes to human sexuality, keep your Christian values to yourself? How do you respond to those who say that?
Well, our nation and our country is built upon biblical principles, and I definitely when I went to legislature, three things were important to me. It was the Constitution, it was my constituents, and it was my convictions. And those three things I would never sway away from as a legislator. I, and I've been very honest with my constituents from the beginning that that's where I stand. But America was built on biblical principles, and I think the further we get away from the biblical principles, the worse we are as a nation, the more trouble we get into as a nation.
Do you hear from your constituents as you go door to door or go to town meetings? Do you hear them talking along those lines? Are they concerned about the moral condition of our country, the social condition? Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh, I think a lot of us concerned about what their children are learning in school. Although I have to say, my county is nowhere near what Jefferson County, pushes. Some of their more woke agenda, but we have parents that's concerned about that. So
Okay. What else are you hearing, by the way? I know you've been interacting with the voters to a large degree in the last couple of months here, right before the primary, which is just around the corner. Early voting starts on May the 16th, and Election Day is May the 21st. Tell us, what are you hearing from the voters? What other issues are on their minds?
well, inflation is a big factor that's hit everyone. That we're starting to see the fentanyl crisis move into our county a lot more. We have overdoses. We have people that didn't even know they were having, pretty much basically murders. I mean, because the people didn't know they were taking fentanyl at all. So people's recreational stuff's being laced with like the marijuana laced with fentanyl, and it's killing a lot of people in our county and surrounding counties. So we definitely need to address the fentanyl issue. We have a few local issues with the bourbon tax going away that we're really concerned about, and we have a lot of work to do on. I was mentioning a lot of the people in Bardstown have a problem with the black mold residue that's on their homes from the distilling process. So it's kind of a personal property rights. And we do have some of the distilleries that actually clean people's homes, but some of them doesn't. So I think that's something we need to work on to give the local governments more control over that type of stuff.
Okay, very good. Well, Candy Massaroni, we appreciate your time joining the Commonwealth Policy Center Candidate Forum. You've got a minute and a half for your closing remarks, and tell the voters why you're running again for a second term, and make your case. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Well, as most people that know me know, I never really wanted to be in politics. Politics found me. So in 2020, the world got a little crazy, and the forced vaccinations and going to my daughter's school board meetings, I was like, something has to be done. So that's when I decided to run for office. And it was by the grace of God that I was elected into office, and I've tried to put it on first on everything I've done since I've been in Frankfurt. So I just really appreciate my constituents. We've built a great group of people here in Nelson County that's trying to fight for the right thing. That great group of prayer warriors. So I look forward to representing Nelson County. If the voters they want to, I hope they vote for me, and I really appreciate them. So.
All right. Candy Massaroni, thank you for your service in our state government. Best wishes to you on Election Day. And thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to vote. Early voting again begins on May the 16th, and Election Day is May the 21st.